Hi everyone, welcome back to the Massive Fan Podcast. This is me, Sun, and today we're going to be talking about JimWen's relationship. I know in my last video I mentioned that this next video might be Jim Beam and I will wrap up with JimWen. But I actually had a request from one of the viewers to do JimWen next, and happy to take on any request of that sort. So today we're talking about JimWen, and I'm going to go into a lot of detail about their relationship, my thoughts on the factors that kind of bring them together, but also the factors that put boundaries between them and how we see that play out during the show, what they might be feeling at each point. Like I have for the previous, I've now done 3 videos. One was for Uncle Jim and Li Ming and their relationship. One was breaking down the timeline of Alan and Wen's relationship, because that's very core to understanding their relationship dynamic and the breakup. And then the last video, which was just posted a few days ago, where I talked about my thoughts on Alan and Wen's breakup, what might have led to it, why they continued living together, why they continued sharing a bed, etc. Right? And that brings me to today, where I'm going to be talking about JimWen and their story. I think to kick things off, I need to be extremely transparent here. I am a huge EarthMix fan. So when I started watching Moonlight Chicken, a large reason I started was because I knew EarthMix was in it, right? And there was already a certain expectation I had of them, because they were brilliant actors. I had watched A Tale of Thousand Stars. I had watched Cupid's Last Wish. And I really enjoyed both their chemistry and their acting. And I had heard a lot of kind of conflicting reviews about Moonlight Chicken. There were some people who loved it. There were some people who really didn't like it. I remember one of the early comments I read about the show was that, hey, Jim and Wen had better chemistry with their exes than they did with each other in the show. And in this video, I think I'm going to go into why I completely do not agree with that take. I think Jim and Wen and the way their relationship played out was exactly what was needed for both of their characters. Again, I think another view I've heard a lot is, it felt like Uncle Jim hated Wen for the first 5-6 episodes, and then suddenly a switch flipped, and he started somewhat liking him, and there was no build up to that. Again, not a view I completely agree with, and I'll go into why in this video. But I understand that for a lot of people who are watching the show and maybe not paying attention to all of the little minute details, which you don't, a lot of people don't watch that way, right? The first time you watch a show, you watch it for the story. Whatever sinks in, you're done with the story, you're done with the show, you move on. But it is when you come back to a show the second time, the third time, in my case, the 10th time, that you really pick up on so much about the characters, so much about the acting choices of each actor, so much about the underlying stories beneath the expressions and the kind of chemistry between all the characters. I think it was really beautifully done, all in all, and I really want to dig into that here and take you guys through it. Hopefully at the end of this, everyone's going to be on the same page as me, that EarthMix were amazing, JimWen are amazing, they needed to be in love, they had the love story that they needed, and end up living happily ever after. We'll see if we get that. Please do leave a comment at the end and let me know if you actually got there by the end of this video. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started. I think to kick things off, I would talk about the first night, right? The show starts off with the focus on JimWen, and that says something because the show has so many different characters in it. I think putting JimWen front and center in the beginning of the first episode was very intentional of the director in terms of framing the story. They were very much the characters that the rest of the show was going to move around. And you see that kind of happen, right? Regardless of who you pick up, all of their growth and storylines are in relation to either Jim or Wen. Whether it is Li Ming, whether it is Gaipa, whether it is Alan, it's all kind of connected. I think the only person whose growth happens outside of Jim and Wen is Heart, and that is in association with Li Ming alone, right? Very little to do with anyone else in the show, which is unique to Heart. I think everyone else is very well connected in this. For even Leng, Mark's character, is connected to Uncle Jim. So you see like this network of relationships going out from Jim and Wen, and that bring this entire community of characters together. So they become very core to the story. And that first night is what kicks all of that off, right? I think going off the first night, there are a lot of things you can pick up about the characters and their impressions of each other on that first night when they met. Obviously, there's that iconic shot of Wen lifting his head from the table and looking at Jim, and Jim looking back at him, and there's instant kind of chemistry, spark, connection. I have watched so many reactions of the show, and I think everyone reacts the same way in that moment. They're just like, oh my goodness, these two are so attractive, which is true. They're very attractive. And the second reaction is always, oh my God, look at how they're looking at each other. Stuff is about to go down, which obviously it is as well. What I really liked about how that played out though was they didn't just go from instant connection to, let's get in bed together. It was instant connection, then let's pretend it doesn't exist and sit down and chat for some time. There was the kind of intentional hand grab by One when he takes the can of beer from Uncle Jim, where he's kind of testing the waters, figuring out, is this guy interested in men? Is he interested in me? Then there is obviously, they walk away from the diner and they meet the old lady who has the little shrine, where she says, both of your children will grow up well, and they kind of exchange this little smile with each other. I think they're all like little things where they're checking each other out to figure out, is this mutual? Is this going to go somewhere? Because obviously they're both gay men who are unsure if the other is gay, at least right off the bat. And so they're testing the waters, testing things out, testing to see what's safe. And then obviously you have that walk down the alleyway, with the instrumental music. And it's one of the most beautiful shots I think I've ever seen in a drama. Just the chemistry between them with zero words, only eye contact, only the barest of touches. It's so beautifully shot. The lighting, I know EarthMix complained a lot about not being allowed to wear makeup and how their faces looked so oily, but the glow was so beautiful in that shot. And then obviously they go on to sleep together in Uncle Jim's house. Now I think for Uncle Jim, the way he approached that night, I get the sense that it's something that might have happened for him before, in the sense that he might have picked up strangers and had one night stands before, because he doesn't want to get emotionally attached. He doesn't want anything complicated, and so the ease and convenience of a one-night stand probably made a lot of sense to him. On the other hand, One obviously is up until 6 to 8 months before he met Uncle Jim, he was in a relationship, and then on and off again, friends with benefit situation with Alan. And it doesn't feel like he's really explored or gone out and met anyone or done anything after that. So he's also in a space where he's like, I want to just sleep with this person and see where it goes. So I think when they start off that night, when they have that night of passion, it is neither of them is looking at it as a long-term thing. Obviously, one has that line where he says, let's see if this is going to be something that ends in just tonight. And I think that is just going off of the chemistry he feels and whether he thinks one night is going to be enough or not. But I think both of them approach it with a very casual mindset. Where things kind of change is, I think, in the morning after. Jim sees there's a whole sequence where one comes down and there's a change, right, from the man he was the night before to the man he is the morning after. His hair is down, whatever gel was holding it up is gone, his shirt is gone, he's looking very soft and approachable and comfortable and warm in that scene where he's sitting on Jim's couch and cuddling and playing with Jimbo. And Jim kind of sits in the sofa next to him and just watches him for some time as he's talking to the cat. And I always have this line that goes off in my head whenever I see that scene, which is, the way to a man's heart is through his cat. And I think that's true of not just EarthMix, but also JimWen, especially for Jim. I feel like in that moment when he saw one really soft with the cat and like playing with him and like being generally very sweet, as someone who has pets, if I met someone who was going to treat my dog like he was a king, I mean, he has won major brownie points with me. And I think that's the same thing here. I think one just upgraded from a one-night stand to okay, he's kind of cute and he seems like a really nice person to Jim, but one on the other hand has also kind of had an amazing night and he enjoyed the conversations with Jim the previous night as well, and he's looking to kind of explore and see, can this go any further, right? I think when they have the conversation, Jim doesn't ask about anything. He just very awkwardly and very straightforwardly drops one off and says, you can find the main street there and, all the best for everything. And one realizes that, okay, this is not going to really go anywhere. This man is not interested at all. And again, when he runs into Jim again when they're eating breakfast at the congee shop, I think that's when one decides that, okay, I'm not done with this. Whether he's done or not, obviously there's still some interest here with him. For whatever reason, he's trying to deny it, but he's still interested and I'm obviously still interested. So I don't think I'm fully done here, but I'll leave it on his terms and we'll see where it goes. So I think right off the bat, both of them approach it differently, but they both kind of end up in the same place where they both know that after that one night, something has shifted in both of them. Jim has probably for the first time since Beam looked at someone and thought that, okay, this guy is cute, this guy is attractive, he's interested in me, he's easy to talk to, but as a result, he's dangerous and I need to keep him at a distance. Whereas one has experienced, obviously, not a bad relationship, but like a relationship that didn't work out with Alan. He didn't get what he needed out of it. He didn't feel fulfilled. He wanted, obviously, a safe space, a home, someone to make him feel at peace after a long day, and Alan was not that person. And I think in the interactions of the previous night and the next day morning, he gets the sense of, I feel peace around this man, right? I want to explore this further. I feel like there's something more there. I think with one, it's a little bit of gut instinct and just instant attraction and knowing what he wants. And that gut instinct gets fed through each episode, right? Whether it is one realizing that Jim's chicken diner is, serving stuff at a lesser cost in order to feed the society properly. Whether it is what Jim tells him about chopping the chicken and like not giving it thin because it doesn't make sense for him to have leftovers in the shop. He doesn't know what to do with it. He would rather give that food to his customers. I think at every point, Jim feeds one's belief that this is a good man and this is a man who will make me happy and who I see myself being happy with. This is the kind of man that I'm looking for. So you see in each point, where, including the point where one shows up at the diner, and he goes with Jim to the shrine, and he finds out that Jim's been every year giving free food to the shrine during their celebrations, even though maybe Jim can't afford it, but it's his contribution to the society. I think at each point, one realizes that, oh my God, this guy is such a good man. And but he also realizes that Jim doesn't see himself that way. For whatever reason, Jim is closed off, Jim is unhappy, Jim doesn't feel like he deserves much in life, and one becomes very determined to prove him wrong. So there are multiple points in the show where one kind of pushes Uncle Jim's boundaries, and what you see is Uncle Jim kind of giving in a little bit, but never saying no. And what that comes across to a lot of people is it comes across as rejection. But I don't think Uncle Jim was ever really rejecting Wen. And that's why one never really gives up, right? I'll go over some of these instances, and I'll put captures of the scenes I'm talking about on the side over here. But I think the first scene I'll pick up is actually in episode 2, right? When they're on the staircase and they're having that conversation about what one wants. One talks about wanting a home, somewhere where he can go and someone's waiting for him, and he feels peaceful. And Uncle Jim, well, he doesn't initiate the kiss that one is obviously looking for. Instead of giving him a hard no, he says, I'm not the kind of person who should be anyone. At every point of time when one brings this up, Uncle Jim gives more of an explanation as to why he is the way he is and why one shouldn't care about him. And it's never a no. Again, after that, when they're at the shrine, one asks, do you really not see this going anywhere? And Uncle Jim again just opens up more about him and Beam and the fact that he was cheated on. Then when one throws him a birthday party at home, he allows one to stay over and to stay in his room. But when one tries to kiss him, again there's a distance he puts between himself and one. Now I want to talk about that scene in particular slightly more, because I think that is one of the only scenes in which we see Jim think about Beam while he's with one. One goes to kiss Jim, and Jim flashes back to scenes where he and Beam are having sex. And I think there are a couple of ways to interpret that. I think one interpretation I've seen a lot is obviously that Jim is not over Beam. I kind of saw that whole scene a little differently. So I think it was more of a warning mechanism in Jim rather than something that was actually reminding him of Beam. I actually believe that Jim was getting over Beam in a very real way in the lead up to that breakup when they fight on the docks and Beam leaves. Because we see that Jim found out about the cheating fairly at one point, and we also see that there was probably some amount of time that passed with Jim keeping that knowledge to himself and just kind of observing Beam's behavior up until he confronts him on the docks. There was probably, we don't know how much time passed, whether it was months, whether it was days, whether it was years. It's kind of very vague as to how much time passed, if much time passed. But there is definitely some time that has passed between Jim finding out that Beam was cheating and Jim confronting Beam about it. And so I actually think that he was already kind of putting a distance between him and Beam up until when they had that fight on the docks. obviously Beam dying was terribly sad. It was a person he was in a relationship with for 5 years. He was in love with this man. Obviously they were planning to build a life together, and Jim didn't know up until close to the end that, you know, Beam was not staying true to him. So all of Jim's emotions were very real. But at the same time, the fact that the last thing they did was fight. The fact that he could have maybe kept Beam from getting on that ferry altogether, I think that's what really stays with Jim and makes Beam this ghost in the back of his head more than anything. So I don't think Jim has any feelings for Beam left when the entire story of Moonlight Chicken goes on. I think he talks a lot about Beam with One because he has never talked about this stuff with anyone before, right? Who does he have in his life? He has Li Ming, he has Leng, and they seem to be the two people who are closest to him. Outside of that, he talks to Gaipa's mom, but they're not close enough that I think they've talked about anything outside of business. Regardless of how open Gaipa's mom might be to listening, to hearing Jim out on all of these things, I think he keeps a distance from everyone around him. And so he starts seeing One as someone he can safely talk to, who will listen to him, who can give him good advice, or who will just understand, right? And so that's why he starts talking to One about Beam and revealing his story. It's both in an effort to offload all of these things and also kind of feel lighter maybe, but also in an effort to help One understand that, hey, there is so much baggage that I carry, right? And you say that you want to be with me, but do you know what that really means, right? Because all of this stuff that I've carried with me for all of these years is not going to go away overnight. It's going to stay with me. It's going to bother me. I might have nightmares about it still. It's all going to be hanging over me like a shadow. And is that something you're okay with? I think that's what Jim is trying to do at each point in which One tries to push the boundaries further. Jim opens up to almost try and scare him away, like to say that, hey, this is how fucked up I am. Excuse the language, but yeah, this is who I am. This is where I am. Are you sure you really want to be getting involved with this? And at every point, One kind of pushes back and says, yes, I am sure, regardless of what you've been through, who messed with you, or what they had, what kind of impact they had in your life, I'm here to make it better. I want to make it better. I want to show you that you deserve good things. In that way, he becomes this vehicle of change, of acceptance, of peace for Jim, whether it is helping him mediate his relationship with Li Ming, which is so fractured and volatile in that moment when One enters the scene, or it is finding Beam's girlfriend, or the person who used to be his girlfriend, and urging Jim to kind of go and talk to her and get his closure, because that's what he needed in order to move on. I think in that way, Jim, in every episode, you see him, I won't say fall in love, but you see him open up a little more to this person who keeps knocking on the door to his heart. And like slowly by slowly, the doors start to open in each episode, up until the very end when, you know, he has opened it completely and let One in, and, you know, we get that amazing post-credit scene where they're sitting on the couch and watching a movie and eating popcorn and just being very adorable together. So we've talked about Jim and how he, at each point, he's not really rejecting One, but it's he's more putting off the decision, making a decision of any kind, and also trying to scare One away. I think the other thing to really explore is, why is One so patient? How is One so patient, right? I think there are multiple times, at least in the first few times I watched the show, where I was like, oh my God, this is the point I might have walked away, right? How is this man putting himself through this again and again, trying again and again, even though Jim is turning him away and like putting a distance between them at each point. Why does one go back for more? And I think that comes back to what one was looking for in a partner and what he saw in Jim. He talks about it in episode 2. He says, I want a home. I want somewhere I can go where I'm at peace, someone who will be waiting for me at the end of a day. And I think the other thing one really wants, which comes across through the show, but he doesn't talk about outright, is I think he wants family, right? He's obviously lived on his own for so long. He's kind of had this nomad style life where he's moved from Bangkok to Pattaya. He tried putting down roots with Alan, but it didn't really stick. He never felt comfortable there. He's looking for somewhere that's permanent, right? Somewhere he feels like he's safe, somewhere he feels like this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And I think that gets touched on when he says love is like a home. If it's not right, you should move out, but when it's right, that's where you want to be for the rest of your life. That's what one sees in Jim. He wants a man who understands the value of family, who understands the value of home, who understands the value of peace and being there for someone. And he sees that Jim is all of those things. If he gave himself the chance to be, Jim could be all of those things. And so he's not willing to let that go. He's like, this is rare. This man is so beautiful inside and out, and I want him to be mine. I want to be there for him and help him through all of his struggles. And so I'm not going to let go. In whatever capacity he wants me around, I will be around until he's ready for more, right? But at the same time, I will keep pushing. I will keep nudging. I will keep reminding him that, hey, I'm here, I'm waiting, I'm interested, and I want you to be interested too. And I think that's what, at the end, Jim really appreciates as well. I think Jim realizes that this constant knocking is what's helping him open up, and that's exactly what he needed in order to finally put the past behind him and move on to a new chapter in his life. I think the last thing I'll touch on, because I don't want this video to get too long, is just the dialogues, the acting, the way the scenes are shot. Some of the most beautiful scenes in the show are EarthMix scenes, and that's not just because I'm biased, but also because of the way they're framed and how they're shot. I think I talked about the first one where they walk through the alleyway with the lanterns and the sweat and the glow in their skins. It's so beautifully done. And then there's the shot on the stairs in episode 2, where they're wearing complementary colors, and there's like a blue and gold, as there always is in the show, a blue and gold balance. And it's again such a beautiful scene in the way it's shot, in the way that yearning and emotion is expressed. The next scene to mention after that is probably the scene on the docks with the Pattaya sign on the background, which again I'm posting all the scene captures here so that you can have a look of what scenes I'm talking about. But that was again just a gorgeous scene. You see in the behind the scenes, if you watch the behind the scenes of the show, you see that scene actually got interrupted and they had to wait because a ferry actually came in, and then they had to wait for that to go in order to be able to shoot again. But when you're watching that scene, none of that is evident, right? It looks like they had all the time in the world to stand there and talk to each other. That's actually also the scene where one first shows any kind of frustration in the fact that Jim keeps pushing him away, in the fact that he's coming up against walls. And I think Jim sees that, Jim feels that, and obviously opens up even further and gives him the last piece of the puzzle one needs in order to put together the whole picture of why Jim is so hesitant to try again. But yeah, so each of those scenes so beautifully shot. I think even the last scene post credits where they're sitting in the couch in Jim's home watching that movie that Jim loves, it's again so beautifully shot, not just for the steamy makeout session that happens at the end, but also just for how they've both opened up and gotten lighter. You can see it in both their faces, you can see it in their interactions, you can see Jim is so accepting and welcoming of one in his space. And just EarthMix, obviously, I mean, I've already mentioned it, I'm a huge fan. I think they did a brilliant job in this show. Yes, there are so many different characters, there are so many different angles to the story, and I know a lot of people were watching the show for Hart and Li Ming and, to a degree even Alan and Gaipa. But I think the entire story doesn't come together without JimWen, right? And I think they did a job of anchoring the show in a way that wasn't dominant. Like in a lot of shows, it's very obvious when one CP is the main CP and like everyone else has stories around it, and you give them screen time as necessary. But Moonlight Chicken was not about that, right? It was very much about the community, but all of the community's interactions and storylines were anchored by JimWen. And I think EarthMix did a really good job of anchoring the show that way. I have immense respect for them and their work and the kind of dedication they put into the show. I think their acting was it went up an immense level from anything they had done before, and they carried that over into their next projects as well. Looking forward to seeing more from them. I think if you haven't watched Osan's Love Thailand, please do give it a watch. It is amazing. I am thinking I will cover Osan's Love Thailand on this podcast at some point. I want to binge watch it a few times before I do that. I mean, please do give that show a watch. And obviously we have them coming up in Only Friends Dream On, which I'm so excited for. But yeah, nothing but love and respect for EarthMix and what they managed to do in the show. That brings me to the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed this video on JimWen, and let me know what your thoughts are, where you agreed, where you disagreed. I think the way I talked about JimWen was very much like a flow. I had all these thoughts. It's a little bit like how I approached Li Ming and Uncle Jim's video. I just had all of these thoughts that I wanted to share about them, and it might have come out slightly unstructured, but I'm hoping the emotion and my intention came across fairly well. Let me know what your thoughts are. Leave a comment and I will respond for sure. If you prefer to interact on X, then again, my handle is sunstories7. Feel free to reach out, say hi, let me know your thoughts on this video. I think I have just one more video I want to do on Moonlight Chicken, and that's Jim and Beam's video. I will probably put that out next week, and then it's on to another show. It kind of makes me sad because I love Moonlight Chicken so much, but I actually think that at the end of making all these videos, I'm going to go and rewatch it anyway, so it's not going anywhere, it's still going to stay with me. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked the video, please do leave a like on the video and hit subscribe in order to stay tuned to my future videos. This is Sun signing off.